We're back with part two of our midseason review. I think we can call it that. This time focusing on the defense, a unit that, at points this season has been, uh, people have had some weird talking points, but I think firmly we can say midway through the year, Tony White's back to doing what Tony White does. This defense looks like the unit we expected them to be going into the season. Steve, kind of what are your initial thoughts, I guess, midway through the season on Nebraska's defense? So,
I mean, it's been very, very solid. I mean, obviously they got, I don't know if you want to say exposed or outcoached, whatever it was against Illinois, but against Purdue and then Rutgers, obviously not two programs that are at the caliber of Illinois this year, I think right now, but they've been solid. I mean, Tony White has, guys playing at all three levels at a high level. The D line, the linebackers, the defensive backs, the fact that, Tommy Hill has an injury and oh, don't worry, we have this Sierra Wright cat that showed up from USC in the summer. He can step in and has been playing and holding his own out there and looking like a real Big Ten corner. I mean, that's been very impressive, and I think that's a credit to Sierra Wright, but it's also a credit to Tony White and John Butler and that staff for getting through to Sierra Wright and getting the best out of him. And I think the steps forward, I think we've seen even more steps forward from guys like Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmaker, Jamari Butler, and then John Bullock at the second level. Some young guys are getting playing time and they're playing well. So I think, from looking at this thing from up high and seeing everything, I just think that the defense is playing very well right now. It's one of the better defenses in the nation right now, and so they're going to face some tough tests in this back half of the season. But I think they're up for it. I think they're old, they're veteran, they know the defense, and they're making adjustments that need to be made. So I've been really impressed with the defense.
yeah, and you look at some of the numbers too. The only team in the country that hasn't let up a rushing touchdown this year. They're top 10 in so many different metrics, top 15, top 25, just far and away. Like, I mean, clearly one of the better units in the country, for sure in the Big Ten right now. And I'm sure those numbers will get adjusted a bit when they have with Indiana and USC and Ohio State on the schedule coming up, but three good offenses. But
Mhm.
uh, I'm excited. I think Tony White and his unit are up for the tasks ahead. I think, for Nebraska the rest of the year, we felt this team was going to be a defensive led team going
Mhm.
into the year. And then Dylan did what he did early in the year, and it was like, oh, okay, well, they've got something at least offensively too. Now it feels like we're back to like, hey, it's to win games, it's going to have to be led by the defense. The defense is going to have to get some stops and create some momentum, and they've done a good job of not only creating those stops, getting momentum on Nebraska's to Nebraska's side, but creating turnovers too. Getting those balls back in Dylan Raiola's hands, in the offense's hands with a short field, with an opportunity to do something, and that's been, I think, the most impressive part. I guess for you, we'll start here with the same superlatives we did yesterday. What's been the biggest surprise for you on the defense?
Yeah, so this is kind of a hard one for me to think of, like biggest surprise, because like everybody's been playing well for the most part. Everybody who you thought was going to be playing well has had good seasons, in my opinion. But if I had to pick somebody, an individual, how about Vincent Shavers Jr.? Now, this is kind of a weird one with me because we heard before the season in spring ball and then during fall camp how good Vincent Shavers had been, how fast he was playing, how violent he was playing. And we heard all good things, but sometimes, you hear all that stuff and it doesn't play out on the field. But with Vincent Shavers, it's starting to play out on the field. He only has 8 tackles, but that number is going to start going up. And he's playing more. The past 2 games against Purdue, Rutgers, they've been the most snaps that he's seen this season at 27 and 34, respectively. And we saw Vincent kind of have a breakout play, if that's a thing, where he kind of took Kenny Rutgers tight end Kenny Fletcher, who by the way is like 6'3", 6'4", 200, almost 250 pounds. Vincent Shavers shed his block like it was nothing. Like he was like Kenny Fletcher was like a 170 pounder. And then he met Kyle Monangai, one of the best running backs in the country, head on in the hole. And I think Kyle Monangai got knocked back on that. So look, Nebraska has a dude and Vincent Shavers Jr., we heard that he was a dude in the preseason, but to see it actually play out on the field, I mean, that's kind of a surprise to me because sometimes it's not always like that.
Yeah, and he's a guy I think his role is going to keep growing this year.
Yep.
I forget who it was, but yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. But someone on social media had said it, and he's not wrong. He's like, you don't see freshmen just throwing around
No.
college football players like that,
Yep.
and Vincent's kind of done that since he's been here. Kind of plays fast, plays physical, plays the way they talk about him in practice, and the way they talk about him, like he's playing that way. And I think it says a lot too that well, I mean, Jamari Butler wanted his number back, but the fact that the staff was okay with true freshman Vincent Shavers taking over that single digit one from Butler says a lot about what they believe about him, about what he's doing behind the scenes, kind of his buy into the program and what they believe he can be for this program in the coming years. I've been totally impressed with him. For me, the biggest surprise, you talked about him earlier, Sierra Wright. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you and me before the season when Sierra
Mhm.
committed, you and me went back and watched the film and we both kind of traded just thoughts on him and we're like, this is an interesting depth piece for Nebraska, but I feel like it's going to take a year or so of coaching for him to get to a point where he's playable again, like at the Big Ten level, just because
Mhm.
that's how bad at times the film at USC was. Like, again, he
Mhm.
left the program mid-year. And before he left the program, you look at the film and some of the stuff he was doing, and it wasn't just a him issue; it's a USC defense issue. But
Mhm.
there wasn't clean tackling, there wasn't good angles, there wasn't an aggressiveness. It was sometimes laziness, sometimes just like lackadaisical like effort.
He
You're
wasn't
not seeing.
physical. He was getting run
Yep.
over. He was getting stiff armed. It's like
Hmm.
he was
It's like
avoiding
it's like he
blocks from
was,
offensive
yeah.
linemen.
Yeah, and it's like you're seeing runs downfield or guys catching balls downfield, and it's like defenders, including Sierra, are just like jogging behind them. You're not seeing that this year. You're
Mhm.
seeing a completely different. You're seeing a player that in coverage is extremely sticky, playing
Yes.
through the hands, like to a point where he's drawing penalties just because a coverage is so good. It's not a holding. A true, he got that holding penalty. That's not a holding penalty. That's just
Mhm.
really good defense. But it's like you don't see that very often anymore. You don't see guys play that sticky in and out of breaks, in and out. Like it's just, I've been really, really impressed with him there. And then again, like on the other side of as a run defender, he's willing,
He's
and
willing.
and he's willing. He's stepping into and getting in front of ball carriers, lowering
Mhm.
his shoulder. He's not the biggest guy, so he's not necessarily going to lay a boom on anybody. But
Mhm.
he's bringing guys down in the open field, and you're seeing an effort, a concerted effort. So it was now that we know what we know, we're seeing what the USC's defense is doing this year, and we're seeing what Sierra's doing. It was more of a coaching thing than it was an individual player. It was never a talent issue. It was more of a coaching point issue.
Mhm.
Um, Alex Grinch, is not a great defensive coordinator. We knew that. It took Lincoln
Mhm.
Riley way longer to figure that out. The rest of the country knew it. But for Sierra, I've just been so impressed with him. And Nebraska has a guy now, and I think if when Tommy Hill returns this year,
Yeah.
you have a kind of some flexibility there where it's like, hey, I don't think Sierra needs to come off the field. Whereas like, maybe you move Buford back to safety. You have some flexibility now with what you can do in the back end of the secondary.
And it's going to help out the young corners too in the program, kind of learn and develop and not be forced onto the field, which sometimes that can be a bad thing. Other times it can be a good thing. But I kind of like my corners to maybe stick in the program and maybe not be relied on to play right away when they can have a year in the weight room and development and nutrition and all that stuff and come back as a redshirt freshman or sophomores just better than ever, ready to roll. So, but
Like, I
Tim on
mean,
the
Matt
flip.
Rule said it. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, but yeah,
No,
like
yeah,
Matt
go.
Rule said it this week. Like, they're prepared to play Amari Sanders in one more game and then shut him down to
Yeah.
redshirt. That only happens because of Sierra Wright playing the way he does. Because otherwise, they would have needed Amari Sanders this year.
Bly Hill too.
Yep.
I know Bly Hill wants to play right now. But him, the emergence of Sierra Wright kind of gives Bly Hill the opportunity to maybe use that red shirt as well. He hasn't played in a game to this date, I think, but so he has six. They have four. He can play in 4 games in these next six. So that's really cool too to be able to have that opportunity with Bly Hill, who was impressing in fall camp, or I mean, a spring ball before that knee injury kind of took him out. So Bly Hill, that's another kind of hidden gem thing that I think the emergence of Sierra Wright provides John Butler and Matt Rule with Bly Hill, who was a 6'4" corner who I think I'm just really anxious to see if he can play at the Big Ten level.
Yeah. For you, what's been the biggest disappointment on this defense?
Yeah, so this is tough, and I hate singling out one kid. But I'm gonna go with Principal Umamielen. And again, I don't like saying this because he's only a second year player, Tim. Like, I don't want to continue to belabor this point of like Principal can't play. Of course he can play. He's just a young developing player that I maybe expected to hear more from through the first 6 games. Just considering what he did last year as a true freshman at that jack linebacker spot. He kind of burst onto the scene and had kind of like a freshman All-American type season for Nebraska, and he showed a real ability to get in the backfield, raise havoc, get in quarterbacks' faces. But only 8 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a half a sack this season for Principal Umamielen. MJ Sherman, more of the run stopper in that jack room, has played a little bit more than Principal. But I think that might change later in the back half of the season because of who the defense is going to be playing and the more passing offenses that are going to be on the docket. So I just maybe expect a little bit more from Principal Umamielen. But again, second year player, he's still learning, he's still developing, he's getting stronger. I'm not worried about him at all.
Yeah, and I think again, it's so like relative too with how well this defense is played. Disappointment
Yeah, it's
is so
hard. It was hard to
relative, and
pick this.
and with Prince Will, he's come close. There's times where it's like, oh,
Yep.
you see him, he's flashing off the edge, and he may not get home, but someone else does. So
Hmm.
he's getting close, and I think he is a more developed player than he was last year. But I agree. I thought we'd see a little more from him. I thought the James Williams breakout we had was going to be this. It was Prince Will that was going to have that. But we'll see. There's still plenty of time, I think, for Prince Will to keep developing. And like you said, I think with some of the games ahead, I mean, Terrence
Hmm.
Knighton and Tony White have both talked about the teams they've played. They like to play defense where they can let the pass rushers pin their ears back on second and third down, especially. And they just haven't had that opportunity because of the type of teams they've played where they put them in third and short situations where they have to brace for, kind of the run on third down and can't really put can't put Prince Will and James out there consistently on third down to kind of pin their ears back and get after pass rusher. But we will, I think, see that in the second half against Indiana, against Ohio State, against Wisconsin. You're going to see those guys get an opportunity to pin their ears back.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm still high on Principal. I really am.
Me too. Me
I
too.
think I believe you are too.
Hmm.
Really high on him and what he could be down the line. I just love the length. I think that's a future. That's a guy that a little more weight. A good season or two. I think he's a future. He can be a future pro. Like his brother's currently getting that hype of a top 2 round pick here in this upcoming draft, and I think Principal could potentially get there. I think the length, the natural pass rushing skills, just the twitchiness. I think it's all there. It's about it coming together for him, and it hasn't just yet, but I think it will. And you're starting to see it slowly but surely working for him. For me, again, it's tough to find like a true disappointment on this
Yeah.
defense. If anything, for me, it's the Tommy Hill injury. Just because what it's done for the defense, and like we've said, we've been impressed with the play of Sierra Wright. We've liked Buford on the other side, but when Tommy Hill is at his best, we saw that late last year. We saw it early this year. Tommy Hill at his best completely erases the side of the field. Like quarterbacks don't even really like target him, and when he's healthy, and we saw that first drive against Illinois where he kind of got picked on, but we found out after the game he was actually hurt. He was playing through an injury there and did not look up to the Tommy Hill speed that we've been used to seeing. So more than anything, it just no and again disappointment not just for what it means for the defense, but also for him. He was a guy that early in this year was gaining top 2, 3 round hype. I think he could still get back there, but you miss as many games as he has already. It's kind of tough because it's a deep corner. It's starting to become like a deeper corner
Hmm.
class. And
Yeah.
some of these names are playing and he's not, and teams look at that. So more than anything, it's kind of disappointed for him because this was a good year to kind of make himself some money, potentially work himself into first round contention. And he still very much could. Got some, it sounds like he should be on track to return after the bye week.
Hmm.
What he does against Ohio State, I think scouts will be looking at very closely because he'll be matched up with Jeremiah Smith or Emeka Egbuka or one of those guys. Garnell Tate, one of those receivers out there against Wisconsin, against Iowa. I mean, the scouts will be watching him the rest of the season, I think. So still plenty of time, but more than anything, just kind of just what a disappointment it is for that secondary, because I think that secondary could still play better when he's out there. Like could still level up another level when he's out there and healthy. That's been my again relative disappointment. For you, what's been the most improved unit or most improved just like individual from this defense?
Yeah, so let's go with takeaways, right? I mean, that was a huge emphasis, with Tony White and Matt Rule in the offseason was they wanted the defense to give more series, more drives to the offense. And so how do you do that? You take the ball away. So through 6 games, Nebraska has 10 takeaways, 7 interceptions, 3 fumble recoveries, and that's tied for third most in the Big Ten. So they've been taking the ball away at a higher clip than they were at this point last season. At this point last season, they only had 6 takeaways, so they have 10 takeaways right now. Last season, they had 4 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries after the first 6 games. So they're taking the ball away. And I just think that with that being such a emphasis in the offseason, that has to make Tony White feel good. That has to make Matt Rule feel good. Now, those two guys will never be complacent. They'll never pat themselves on the back and say, "Good job, guys." No, it's like, let's get more, let's get more, let's keep going more. But yeah, I've been really impressed with the improvement with the defense's ability to take the ball away.
For sure, and it's been beneficial for like obviously that Illinois game wasn't their best performance, but there was that strip from John Bullock that put the offense in a scoring position.
Yep.
You've seen critical turnovers. Like the Colorado, you build that momentum up early off that Tommy Hill pick six. There's just been opportunity after opportunity to build momentum off takeaway. For me, most improved. I mean, again, it's from good to great. Really feels like not an improvement from bad to good or anything. It's just been like steady improvement year over year, and a pleasant surprise for me, just the linebacker play. Like the play they've gotten out again, like John Bullock's playing at like a feels like an all Big Ten level so far this
Hmm.
year. A guy that depending on how Nebraska finishes out the season, how he finishes out the season, could be on one of those teams. He's played lights out. Makai Bear, the aggressiveness, the fast physical play we've seen from him. Javen Wright, him being back in the lineup and what he brings as a pass defender, and when quarterbacks drop back, what he's been able to bring. Vincent Shavers, like you said, um, and even the Jacks, like just the play from the Jack spot between MJ Sherman and Prince Will and Willis McGahee the fourth. I think the linebackers was going into the year a unit that I was like, okay, I mean, if you were to circle a group that you want that like that like you could potentially point at and be like, oh, they're kind of a weak point of the defense. I felt it was going into the year the linebackers, but I've been so pleasantly surprised with how well John Bullock and Makai Bear have played
Hmm.
this year.
And then right behind them, Vincent Shavers and then Stephon Thompson too.
Yep.
Shavers kind of gets the limelight and everything, but I thought Stephon has kind of done his job just for somebody who coming into the program he needed time to make the necessary adjustments just because it's hard for a lot of transfers who come from one place and they come to Nebraska and learn how different it is culture wise and standard wise from other places. But I thought Stephon Thompson has been playing some good football lately, along with Vincent Shavers. So that's a good 4-man room and potentially 5-man room when Javen Wright continues to play more and kind of do his thing in the back half of the season.
For sure. For you, is there a unit or any group individual you think something left to prove?
Again, kind of tough just considering how well Nebraska has been defensively. But if I had to pinpoint one, the Jack linebacker group, I mean, we talked about it with Prince Will Umamielen and then MJ Sherman. Not a lot of production there, I guess. Those two guys have combined for 3 sacks, but like with everything else going on with the defense, the emergence of James Williams, who continues to just make offensive tackles miss and get in the backfield and create havoc back there. Again, it's just not like a glaring weakness the Jack linebackers are, but if I had to pick one, I'd go with the Jack linebackers and kind of their production and everything, but stats aren't everything. They're still out there doing their thing. But if I had to pinpoint one, the Jack linebacker spot.
Yeah, I have edge rushers written down, which is pretty much similar, just like guys
Mhm.
coming off the edge. And it's not even because I don't think they've played bad or anything. It's just like I think
Yeah.
the front or the strength of Nebraska's pass rush so far and Nebraska's the front of their defense has been the interior of the D line with Nash and Ty, obviously. But I want to see, a little more. I think the breakout of James Williams has been really nice, and just want to see him continue to
Yep.
to stick on this trajectory. We want to see more from Jamari Butler, a guy that the staff is really high on. That's the voice and the vocal leader of this room, the cultural leader of this room behind the scenes. And the jack spot as well. Just getting more pressure, more pass rush, better edges, like setting the edge in the run game, just like all of that. Just want to see improvement from that in the second half. And the reason I say that too is, and with both of these, when we talked about it with the offense and the defense, we talk about something left to prove. We believe it's because it's something that can be done. I think Nebraska's defense down the stretch, they can prove themselves. These Nebraska's edge rushers, I think they can prove themselves to be effective down the second half of the season. Like I do believe that they're not far off from that. Like I said, like with Prince Will, with Jamari, it's they're getting pressure, they're getting
Hmm.
close. They're just not necessarily getting home, and so you just want to see, you know, pressure turning into sacks, or pressure turning into tackles for loss, or pressure turning into forced turnovers. You want to see it just take that next step, and I think they can do that with the play they're getting from the interior of the line, where defenses are going to start, and they already have, but defenses are even more so going to start double and triple teaming Ty specifically, and
Hmm.
that opens up things for Nash. It opens up things for the rest of the line, and I think you're going to start to see that down the stretch of the season. For
Yeah,
you, is
and
there?
and one
Go
one
ahead.
more thing, Tim, is we're talking about the jack linebackers. That was my answer. Edge rushers was your answer. You look up who's leading the Big Ten in sacks. Nebraska at 20 at
Yeah,
20 sacks. They are second in the conference in sacks per game with a little over 3. So again, we needed to pick something for this
it's all
category,
relative.
but they're all right. They're all right. They're doing just fine.
For sure. And again, if you really want to talk something left to prove overall as a unit, I still think tackling in space is something they could continue to improve on.
Yeah.
Eliminating some of that leaky yardage. They did a really good job of rallying to the ball over the last 2 weeks, especially after that first drive against, or the first quarter specifically against Rutgers. They did a much better job of completely silencing Kyle Monangai in that running game, and eliminating all those yards. But yeah, I just want to see more of that again. Because there were times this year where it feels like guys are able to run through tackles, and when you play Indiana, and I keep harping on this, when you play Indiana, when you play Ohio State, when you play Iowa, and what they're getting out of their running game right now. It all about eliminating that leaky yardage, and I think that's another area. I think if you were to pick a runner up, or something else you want to see left to prove this year, I think it's tackling. For you, player to watch, is there someone you're watching circling down the stretch?
We've talked about him often already, John Bullock. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's played like the best player on the defense, and that's saying something considering who's playing in front of him with Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker, and behind him with guys like Deshaun Singleton. He's been really good. The corners here, right, has emerged, but John Bullock has like been everywhere. I feel like through 6 games, he's leading the team in tackles with 33. He's second in tackles for loss with 5. He had that beautiful strip fumble, forced fumble against, what was it, Iowa or no, Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah, he had pick 6 to kind of finish off Purdue in the fourth quarter. He has 3 pass breakups. He's getting hands on balls and pass coverage, which is, I think, being a box tackler is kind of like his thing, but you kind of wonder about the pass coverage with John Bullock. But he's shown to be more comfortable and confident out there in space. So I mean, if he continues to play like this through the back half of the season against the offenses that they're going to be playing against, and Nebraska continues to win, because I know that's important with what I'm going to bring up next, he's going to be a first or second team all conference linebacker, I think. But the key is to continue on his pace that he's continuing with right now. But Nebraska needs to win games, because Nebraska had, I feel like, multiple at least second or third team all conference defensive players last year. But they hardly got recognition just because Nebraska finished with 5 wins. Now, fair or not, whatever, I don't care. But Nebraska just needs, that win column number to continue growing, and then they'll have more all conference players.
Yeah, and I think Ty is another one that could contend
Yeah,
to be in there.
for sure.
Truly, again, if depending on how much he plays in the second half, I don't know what happens with Tommy Hilson's back, but like I think Sierra's making an argument
Yeah.
and making a
His
making a
name's already
push.
getting out there. People are
Yep.
knowing who he is in the big as a Big Ten corner, not just a guy who did
transferred
what he
in.
did at
Yep.
USC.
Yeah, and James Williams, another one. If he just keeps this up
Yep.
and is on already a trajectory, he's got 4 sacks already. On a trajectory to finish out the year with a couple more. I think he could get in that conversation too. For me, player to watch in the back half, just because it does factor into the Sierra conversation and everything. Marquise Buford, just what he because I've liked what we've seen from him at corner. I
Mhm.
thought he's been kind of a quiet, unsung um, stud, just holding up, his end of it, kind of getting moved to corner for the first time this season, for the first time in a while in his at least in his
Yeah, he
college
he played
career.
corner a little bit earlier, but it had been a long time ago.
Right. And so stepping into that role when he did, playing the way he has, he's such a willing tackler in space,
Yeah.
a true plus, when they kind of run screens and run towards his side of the field, true plus in that regard. So I've really liked seeing that from him. But again, when Tommy Hill comes back, does Sierra move to that other corner spot? Do they move Buford back to that other safety spot? Do they move him off the field to kind of rotate in a corner and safety like they're kind of doing with his little brother right now? What do
Yeah.
they do with Marquise? I don't think he's a guy you can take off the field necessarily, but I think there's
No.
multiple roles. So more than anything,
Mhm.
I think he's just someone to watch because I'm curious how his role evolves and how willing he is to kind of adjust to what the defense needs right now. Because I think the play you're getting out of Sierra, what Tommy Hill is when he's healthy, I think those two have to be your top two corners, it feels like. And then with Buford, it's like, what do you do with him? Do you make him a nickel? Do you make him, you have him take Hartzog's spot? Do you have him take, give like I don't know. I'm more than anything, I think there's just more intrigue of what they do with him more than I actually want to see anything more from him.
Yeah, it's like, everybody just kind of it was such a story in the offseason, like right before the season, I feel like with Marcus Buford being the guy opposite Tommy Hill at corner. Like everybody was talking about the corner spot opposite of Tommy Hill. And when it was Buford, everybody was like, talking about it. But then once the season started, nobody was really talking about it. And it's because,
He
he's
played
held up
well.
really well out there.
Yeah.
And, going into like kind of closing your eyes and thinking about Marquise Buford as a corner, it's like, the physicality is there. The tackling ability is going to be there. The muscle, the attitude, the bump and run, like how hard it would be to get past him when he's playing bump and run. Like that'd be hard to do, but you always wonder about like, okay, what is it like after the play where in pass coverage and he's asked to trail a receiver. I think it's been pretty good. I mean, he's impressed me. Now against Rutgers, he wasn't perfect. He gave up a touchdown. He almost gave up a touchdown to true freshman Ben Black, who dropped it. And he got survived a targeting penalty. Had a holding call called against him. But in the first half, I feel like Rutgers was really picking on him, and he held up well against against Rutgers receivers. So, I tip my cat to Marquise Buford. I totally agree with you. I think it'd be a mistake to take him off the field much, just because of what he means, and he is like Isaac Gifford level of like determined to turn this thing around at Nebraska. And
Mhm.
I just I want his mindset, his physicality out there. So I could definitely see a scenario where if Tommy Hill does return, Sierra Wright continues to play well, and Tommy Hill looks okay out there. Maybe you see a rotation start to happen at that safety spot with Buford and Hartzog.
Yeah. I think that feels like the best solution, but I'm so interested to see what this team does because again, Matt Rule, Tony White, they don't do things the conventional way.
They'll think of
They
something better
yeah,
than us.
yeah, for sure. Oh, they're smarter than us in terms
Yeah.
of that. On that note, I guess Tony White, what have you thought about him so far? I thought he's done a good job. I think early on in the year they were kind of playing that 4-2-5 kind of that quarters coverage shell. They've kind of shifted back to what Tony White likes to do best, which is being unpredictable, shifting the front. I mean, you saw the in-game adjustments they made against Rutgers. That's just so impressive. Changing up the look consistently to throw Rutgers like stout O line and that running game just completely off. Um, really like kind of what I've seen from Tony this year,
Mhm.
specifically kind of when you talk with him and you listen to him talk, just the mentality and how very clearly that mentality has come down just from him through that defense. 'Cause so many of these guys are veterans, like played under previous staffs, and
Mhm.
how quick. Again, we saw it last year too, but I wasn't obviously on the beat. But the buy-in from top down, from Ty Robinson and Nash Hotmacher, and John Bullock and Marquise Buford and all these guys to just buy into what Tony White wants from his unit and
Mm.
to play fast and physical, to play with their ears pinned back. I've just been really impressed with him this year.
I have two. I have two. I mean, a lot of people didn't think he was a head coach after the Illinois game, but that's kind of the fan base, that we're in right now. The highs are high, the lows are lows. But I still think he's a head coach in waiting. I think he's going to take the right fit for him whenever that may be. But yeah, he's a really, really good defensive mind. And like you said, Tim, he's got the guys to follow him into battle and do things the correct way, I feel like. And that's half the battle, with a coaching too, is just to motivate your guys to do well. And this is such a motivated team. It's such a motivated defense full of old guys who have lost so much at Nebraska as Cornhusker football players. Sorry, I got to fly here. But they really want to turn this thing around, and they want to go to a bowl game for the first time since 2016, and they want to make some noise in the Big Ten in November. And it's looking right now like they're going to do it. So credit to Tony White and his assistant coaches. I think Nebraska has a pretty good assistant
Yo,
coaching staff right now. Like those guys don't get the spotlight like Tony White does, but I appreciate Tony White trying to turn the spotlight off of him and onto his assistants because he does
oh,
it
at
every
every
single
at
chance he
every single
gets.
level, like Terrence Knighton
Everyone.
unlocking,
Terrence Knighton, stud. I mean, Rob
yeah.
Dvorak, one of the better young assistant coaches in college football. What more do you need to say about John Butler? I mean, spending the past 10 seasons in the
Mhm.
NFL, coaching really good NFL
And again,
DBs.
if the jury was out on how Butler would adjust, look at the play of Sierra Wright.
Exactly.
Look at Marquise
Like I'm telling you,
Buford.
like Tim and I are not joking. We were pretty low on Sierra Wright when he
Right.
decided to
Coming in and then like
transfer
and
to
again
Nebraska.
and yeah, like you could see the potential there, but it felt
Sure.
just low just because of like, hey, this is a guy coming in because we've seen this at Nebraska in the past, a guy coming in where his morale is all the way low. Like
Hmm.
morale is real low, just in terms of the effort, output, everything, all very, very low. And we've seen that in Nebraska where a guy is just mentally defeated and mentally done. We saw that and we've
Hmm.
seen that in the past under Scott Frost and previous staffs of like what it looks like when a team and an individual is like that, what that looks like on the field. We'd all wondered kind of what that would look like under Nebraska. One fall camp, he looks like a completely different player. One single fall camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that might be just focusing on football for Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't just focusing on football at USC. He was acting on the side too. So at Nebraska, there's not a lot of acting opportunities around here. So he just is
Hey,
focusing
who
on
knows? We
college
might see him
football.
at the lead, you know.
Oh man, if that happens, I'd have to go and like pay a ticket to watch. But yeah, I mean it's been a pleasant surprise this year, right? For sure. He's proven me wrong, absolutely.
For sure. And we don't this is just a fun exercise to kind of close this out. I don't really want to speculate on what jobs may or may not open. But you and I talked before the year off camera about like, hey, what type of job makes sense for Tony White if he is quote unquote a head coach in waiting? At this point, it's like, if you're Nebraska and you have this window right now with Dylan Raiola as your quarterback, with the kind of opportunities out there, do you just kind of pony up, pay Tony and make him a very high paid assistant coach and just be like, hey, listen, we want you to coach ball here with the guys that you've developed. And, right now, when a job opens up that you feel like you're a fit for, you can go. But for now, it feels like I don't think there's a job that's going to open up. I say all that to say, basically, I don't think there's a job that's going to open up at the end of the year that makes sense for Tony White, just from what he's looking for in a program, what makes sense for his recruiting base, and what he wants to accomplish too.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I would think that, you never know these days with college football and how crazy it is and the amount of money flying around. It could make programs just comfortable paying whatever to get him if they really want him. But I could definitely see Tony White becoming the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country. Do you?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I
I do
mean,
too. I do
again, I think
too.
Nebraska's really trying to strike while the iron's hot with this window
Yes.
they have with Dylan, and I think part of like Tony factors into that equation a little bit. I do think hypothetically Nebraska does lose Tony. I think they're set up. Like we just talked about, we
Yep.
praised the assistants. I think they're very well set up to just have someone take over and pick up where pick up right where you left off. But I kind of think just like you think about jobs that could open again. Tony White's a guy that I feels like wants to get back to the West Coast at some point. I don't think there's any
Yep.
big West Coast job opening unless UCLA's one and done or Jed Fish leaves, which I don't think Jed Fish is.
Mhm.
I think Jed Fish is at least at Washington for another year or so.
So Tim, if Tony White does move on somewhere, who's your pick? Who's your assistant pick if Matt Rule chooses to stay in house for his defensive coordinator? I know we're just talk about the future here. Um,
Yeah,
I
speculating.
really like Rob Dvorak and what he brings to the table. I know he's young, but I just kind of see future defensive coordinator written all over that guy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Butler is probably first in line just because of the experience and the age he's got on Dvoracek. But if you're looking for like a Tony White disciple, I feel like it's Rob Dvoracek. Like,
Yeah.
and you talk to Rob, like the dude's wired the way you want a defensive coordinator to be wired.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's gonna. I think the guys love him. I think the guys would play like hard for him.
Sure.
Um, I wouldn't hate either Dvoracek or Butler, and even Knighton. I wouldn't hate Knighton. I just truly believe, like just listening to Terrence Knighton talk and his philosophy. I think he's a career D line guy. I think he's a guy that is going to stick with his front because I think he really likes coaching D line. Like I think he just really enjoys developing those guys, getting those guys. I think he takes a lot of pride in creating a pass rush, defending the run. I just think he's more on the development than he is on the schematic side of things. And some guys are just built for that.
Butler makes a ton of sense. I may have spoke too soon on that one, Tim, but Butler, with the experience, obviously, and that would give more runway for Rob Dvorak behind him to maybe stay a few more seasons until whatever Butler decides to do. If the NFL is in his future too, if he wants to get back to that level, I would totally understand that. But having Butler in that position for a season or two or three would give Rob Dvorak so much, good experience and more experience to be able to step into that role whenever Butler would decide to move on, whenever that may be.
For sure. Not a bad problem to have. But yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that'll probably do it for us here. We'll be back next week with an Indiana preview. We appreciate you following along with this little exercise the last 2 days. And like we said, we'll be back next week.